Hi, I'm Dave Fountain and I was a teacher for 27 years, but now I spend a lot of time helping other teachers with their pension and retirement planning. I taught IT and maths, but I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a teacher having a go at explaining these things to other teachers. One area that I do get asked about every now and again, mainly by head teachers with their slightly larger pension pots, is what is the annual allowance? The annual allowance is a limit put in by the government to stop people taking too much advantage of the actually pretty good tax benefits of putting money into a pension pot. The limit is $40,000 a year, and the year runs from the 6th of April to the 5th of April each year. Now there are exceptions to that amount. The first is if you've already started taking money out of a pension pot. In that case, the limit drops to just £4,000 a year. This is to stop or to limit something called pension recycling, where you take out a lump sum of tax-free cash and then you put it back into another pension fund to claim back more tax that you haven't paid in the first place. So there are rules about doing recycling, and this is one of those, that your allowance drops significantly when you start taking money out of a pension. I've done another video on that if you're really interested in that aspect. The second exception is to do with very high earners. Now, by that I mean people who are earning over £200,000 a year. And to be frank, if you're earning that kind of money, you can afford a proper financial advisor, and I'm not going to go into that level of detail. I'm talking mainly to people like myself who are normal teachers. Normal? Hopefully normal. So the key then is what counts towards this £40,000 allowance. And with the teacher pension schemes, it is not that simple, as I'm going to try to explain. Before I look at the difficulties of working out how much your annual allowance is used in the teacher schemes, I want to explain the more simpler money pot kind of pensions that most people have. These are the private pensions or defined contribution schemes. Now, as teachers, you can have these as well as your teacher's pensions, which is why I'm going to explain about them first. These are the SIPs, the AVCs, the things that you can pay once you've received your money from your employer. Now, the amounts that count are amounts paid into the scheme by you, by your employer, indeed by anyone at all, and that includes the taxman. You simply add up all the money that has been paid into the pension fund, including the tax relief by the taxman. Most schemes are set up to claim back 20% automatically. So if you have a private pension and you pay in £8,000 a year, then the taxman is going to top that up with the £2,000 worth of tax. And so it's used up £10,000 of your annual allowance. Quite simple, just add up all the money that goes into the pot. Now, the teacher pension schemes. These are not pots of money, but are what are called defined benefit schemes. So working them out isn't as straightforward. What has got to be measured is the increase in value of the benefits. Now, this involves both inflation and a value multiplier. This multiplier is currently set at 16. It's something that is set by the tax authorities, and it applies to all defined benefit schemes, not just the ones for teachers. So don't think you're being singled out if they change it. But of course, I just want to look at the teacher's pension scheme, so let's move on to that. So for the teacher's pension scheme, you need two benefit statements, the one from last year and the one from this year, in order to work out how much the value has increased. The calculation starts with last year's statement. The pension is multiplied by 16. Then any lump sum is added on. So this is just for the teachers in the older 80th scheme. The other two schemes don't have any automatic lump sum. Then we need to add on inflation. Now, there are different measures for inflation, but the one that is used for this is the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. If you're in doubt, then putting in a lower figure is what you really want to do, because that's safer. What it will do, it'll end up using more of your allowance, so that you don't fall foul of going over your allowance if you put more in elsewhere. We do the same for the figures from this year's pension. And let me show you how that works on the spreadsheet that I've made. Now, the first thing to do is to make a copy. You go File, Make a Copy. Don't share it with the same people. You want to keep your numbers private. And if I shared this master sheet with anybody, if you share it with other people, the same people, you'll end up sharing your details with everybody else. So just keep it as a private copy. Make a copy in your own area. So I'm going to go to the copy I've got here. This is my private copy. And then we need the benefit statements. And the part I'm interested in is the bit where it tells you your total pension amounts, and particularly the figures over here. Now I'm in two schemes, so I'm going to put these two into two different areas of my spreadsheet. The first thing is to put in what the inflation rate is. I think this year is about 1.7%. If I wanted to be careful, I'd put in 1.6 or 1.5. And then I'm going to take the numbers from my pension statement, in this case 17,000. This is my last year's figures. 17,119.26. Whoops, I put that in the wrong one. That goes in, I'm in the 80th scheme, so that goes in there. That is multiplied by 16, and the lump sum is added, which gives me a starting value of 330,000, which is there. And let's carry on. I've got another figure in here, which is my career average scheme, which is all the twos, 71. And again, this is just multiplied by 16, so the starting value there is that. It's then multiplied by inflation as well. I forgot about that. Now we come to this year's statement. Now there's no point me showing you this year's statement for myself because I've finished teaching and it won't have increased much. So if I look at what I might do for the annual pension, let's say that my pension has gone up to 18,000. That's simply multiplied by 16, and they've added on the lump sum. It gives me a closing value of 342. And the amount of allowance I've used is the difference between those two values. So I've used £11,000 of my annual allowance. Do the same for my career average scheme. Let's put in 2,500. And that tells you how much of my allowance I've used in that scheme. So in total, I've used £15,000 of my annual allowance from my teacher's pension. I may not have paid in £15,000, very unlikely I paid in £15,000, but my pension value has increased by that amount, and that is what is used in your annual allowance for these kind of schemes, the defined benefit schemes. Now remember, this is only a rough calculator. You can use it to give you an idea of whether you have any unused allowance. But of course, if you want to use that allowance up this year, you'll need to do these calculations before the end of the tax year in April, which may mean it's showing you less than you actually have used. So you may want to add on about a 12th to the total shown, just to account for the fact you're doing it a month early. Also, you need to have an estimate of what the inflation figure is the year before the year has ended. So if you want to play it safe, use a lower inflation figure, as that will increase how much of the allowance you've used. So you're not going to accidentally put more into a private pension, go over the limits and start having to pay back tax, and gets all very complicated and messy. So hopefully that's explained what the annual allowance is. And one last thing. Obviously, if you get a sudden pay increase, the final salary scheme works on your final salary. And if, for instance, you were on top of the pay scale and you got a TLR1, suppose you're on top of the pay scale and you're on 50,000. You get a TLR1 and you get a promotion of, say, 10,000. That's like a pay increase of 20%. That means your final salary pension could easily suddenly jump 20%. Now that is a big jump in 1 year, and it may mean that you end up with some figures that go over that annual allowance. Don't need to worry too much, because you are allowed to use up to your 40,000 from this year and 2 years back. So you can get a total of £120,000 over a period of 3 years. You can use up unused allowances from previous years. Of course, you will have used some of those allowances in previous years, but there's a good chance you won't fall foul of using too much. Just be wary if you have a sudden pay increase. that you don't get tempted to, oh, I'm £10,000 a year better off this year, I'll add that to a private pension as well. Do check the figures very carefully at that point to make sure you aren't going over that year's annual allowance. What you need to do is wait until the next year and then put it in, because the next year, of course, your pay increase, hopefully even with inflation, is not going to get anywhere near that 40,000 annual allowance. So I hope that helps. By all means, ask me any questions. I'll put a link to the spreadsheet in the comments underneath.